What is going on, you guys? It is officially the end of week 7 fantasy football. And you know what we do at the end of every single week of fantasy football? I go live and I discuss what I got right and what I got wrong in my fantasy football analysis for the particular week of fantasy football, guys. So it's a big deal on my channel because I like to maintain a large level of transparency with you guys. I want to be as transparent as possible with you guys. Every time I do this segment, I just want to expose myself. And the reason I go live is because if you guys want to dunk on me, it's your time to do it live while I'm here. Go ahead, dunk on me if I got something wrong for you that I'm not calling out. Feel free to call it out. But I wanted to be live because I wanted to be transparent as possible with you guys. That's the message I try to push on my channel right now. So, Jason Devoja, I already see you in here. You got 22 from Hopkins. You want big this week. I love it, man. I love it, love it, love it. Glad to see that you're winning big. I appreciate you joining me tonight, guys. So if you appreciate this particular segment that I do where I call out what I got right and what I got wrong as well, there are not many fantasy football YouTubers out there who do a segment like this, especially live, where you can expose yourself like this. So if you do appreciate the segment, please go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. It is greatly appreciated, guys. So let's go ahead and just get right into what I got right and wrong. So the first thing that I got right, and this is a fun one, obviously, because to me, I've been shouting this guy from the rooftop, and honestly, you might be tired of hearing about him at this point. This is just a situation where, I honestly was so big on Jackson Smith-Njigba from the beginning, like ever since draft time. I've been big on Jackson Smith-Njigba, really dating back to 2021. And like I said, my audience who's been here for a long time, you're probably exhausted hearing about Jackson Smith-Njigba from me. But I got to tell you guys, he's on the right track, and I saw this coming. I said before the start of the season, I saw two outcomes this season for Jackson Smith-Njigba. Number one, he's better than DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett right out of the gate. I said that was what I saw happening right away. So I was wrong about that. No doubt about that. But the other outcome that I saw was that he would get it going after the bye week. And immediately out of the bye week against Cincinnati in week 6, he saw more downfield targets and more downfield routes than he had the entire year before that. Like, it was there. And that was the missing piece for Jackson Smith-Njigba was those targets, was those routes down the field. Everything he had done up to that point was at or near the line of scrimmage, like 2-yard out routes, just little wide receiver screens right near the goal, right near the line of scrimmage. Nothing that he could do with fantasy football. So once I saw that missing piece in week 6, I said, this guy's going to break out. And he finally found the end zone for the first time of his career against Arizona on Sunday. This is a sign of things to come. If you have not seen my buy low trade target video yet today, I would go back and watch that. It came out Monday morning at 8 a.m. Central, and I went pretty deep into why I believe that this is just a sign of things to come for Jackson Smith-Njigba, and this is really not going to be his best game. Jackson Smith-Njigba is about to break out, guys. So I'm already calling this one, myself right on this one, because Jackson Smith-Njigba, to me, it was so clear, like way better prospect than Quentin Johnson, who I've been discussing quite a bit over the past several weeks because I was right on him as well. I don't want to get into that right now. I called myself right on that one last week, so I won't double dip into that take right there. Jackson Smith-Njigba, to me, look out, guys. And like I said, if you could buy the guy low, I would absolutely make it a priority to do that because Jackson Smith-Njigba not only is here to stay, but also you're gonna see my thoughts on DK Metcalf in tomorrow's wide receiver rankings video. And I do not have a very positive outlook right now on DK Metcalf, just so you know. Here's what I got wrong, and I actually see this comment in here from Live Creation, which I appreciate you calling it out because this is exactly what I was going to talk about now. One of the guys that I really rose on last week ahead of the week, after having him as like a top 20 wide receiver in my rankings on Tuesday last week, was Christian Watson. And Christian Watson, I said, as the week went on, I just got higher and higher on the guy. And I said, look, the matchups there. They're coming off a bye week. Jordan Love, I think he'll get it going against the Broncos defense. It was literally the exact opposite. Christian Watson was terrible. And really the problem stems deeper than just Christian Watson. The real problem here is that Jordan Love sucks. And that's what I said. I said that earlier on the buy low video today. And I actually included Christian Watson as a buy low candidate. But I also said there's a lot of concerns that I have here with Christian Watson. Christian Watson in this game versus Denver, the workload was unstable yet again. And that's really the ultimate problem here with Christian Watson, is that his workload is just never consistent. And here's the reality with that. Christian Watson's not your Jackson Smith-Njigba type, your Jordan Addison type, as we just saw tonight. The amount of targets and the amount of routes that Jordan Addison runs over the middle of the field is significant. Why? Because he can separate. The guy's a great route runner. He's quick on his feet. He's good getting in and out of breaks. That's not Christian Watson's game. Christian Watson's fast, but there's a difference between straight line speed, which he has, and quickness and quick twitch ability that Jackson Smith-Njigba, Jordan Addison have, Davante Adams has. Christian Watson's not that player. Christian Watson is very good at the big play because he's big, he's got long strides, and he's fast. If he doesn't have a quarterback that can get it done, it's not going to work. So I do have concerns with Christian Watson. And obviously, he went out with an injury basically on the last drive of the game. Could be one that we're going to have to watch. It definitely will be one to watch for sure. Leading into week 8, we're definitely going to have to keep watch. But, obviously I was dead wrong about my take on Christian Watson. And it's really disappointing because, I really thought that coming out of the bye week, they would have such a better game plan and a better plan to use Christian Watson. And it was the exact opposite. I mean, they looked totally unprepared in that game versus Denver. And Jordan Love just looks bad. And that's obviously not absolving Christian Watson of not playing good either. But, when you've got a quarterback like that, I should not be making a call on Christian Watson to be a top 15 wide receiver in fantasy football. And I definitely will not be doing that in the near future until I see some big games pop off, which could be a while based on the injury that potentially is there for him. Speaking of Jordan Addison is a guy that, listen, I am a big proponent for fantasy football trades. And I have gotten so many of my fantasy football buy low targets right. And listen, this is the segment where I'm right. So I feel totally fine coming out here and saying that I've done pretty well as far as calling the right guys for you guys to buy low. And obviously Jordan Addison was featured in my buy low trade targets last week. Obviously I'm filming this after the Monday night game where the Minnesota Vikings surprisingly beat the San Francisco 49ers tonight. And Jordan Addison was a main reason why. Jordan Addison was spectacular against that San Francisco 49ers defense that I thought was going to get after Kirk Cousins. I thought they were going to absolutely bully that offensive line and get after Kirk Cousins in a big way. That didn't happen. And Kirk Cousins was left with time. And Kirk Cousins, to his credit, played his best game in a primetime game that I can remember. He was great. And Jordan Addison was there. Jordan Addison was absolutely tremendous tonight. And here's the thing. Jordan Addison should have gotten more points. Jordan Addison left that game for, I think, a drive or two because he had cramps. And he went to the locker room, probably shot him up with an IV. And he came back out there and he scored some more points for you. Jordan Addison was incredible tonight. And that's the thing about Jordan Addison is that I called this one with Jordan Addison very early on. And this dates back to, of course, pre-draft, where for those of you who purchased my Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide in the offseason, you know my thoughts on the Jordan Addison versus Quentin Johnston debate, which in hindsight, when you look back on it, and we're sitting here tonight talking about it, it's not even a discussion. No rational person who watches football or plays fantasy football is going to argue with you that Quentin Johnston's better right now. Nobody's going to argue with you on that. Dating back to combine time in March, in February, in April, in May, in June, there was the majority of the fantasy football community was saying that Quentin Johnston was the better wide receiver than Jordan Addison. And I said, no, he's not. He's not. Jordan Addison is a much better wide receiver, not only for NFL terms, but he's also just set up for more fantasy football success than Quentin Johnston, especially early on. I said it in the draft guide, and I'll give you this little snippet in the draft guide of what I said about Jordan Addison. I said that Jordan Addison is a pro-ready guy. In fact, I'm feeling generous tonight, so I'm going to pull up my file on Jordan Addison in my Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide. I just want to show you guys what I had written about Jordan Addison in that Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide really quick. So I just wanted to show you guys Jordan Addison was my number 2 wide receiver in the class, and here's what I had to say. I said, I absolutely love the landing spot in Minnesota. After Jordan Addison's combine measurables and testing came in, most dynasty and fantasy football content creators on YouTube jumped ship off Jordan Addison. This is exactly what happened. I have held my firm position on Jordan Addison as the wide receiver 2 in this class. His film is great. He's a great separator, works the middle of the field, and can stretch the field. He was also an 18-year-old true freshman breakout. Sophomore year target share was great. Junior year, not so much in that USC year. Yes, I do wish he was a little bit bigger. He stands at 5'11 and 173 pounds. But overall, Addison is the better fantasy football and dynasty fantasy football choice than Quentin Johnston. Obviously, we're speaking tonight. It's like hindsight's 2020. But Jordan Addison, to me, was always a pro-ready rookie. And you saw it tonight. Jordan Addison was a buy low trade target that I hope you got, because Jordan Addison, I saw this coming from a mile away, to be honest with you guys. Man, here's something I got really, really wrong. This one's actually embarrassing, because you guys know that on this channel, I take defense in fantasy football very, very seriously. It is one of my favorite videos to make all week is the defense ranking video, which, guys, by the way, defense ranking video out tomorrow ahead of the waiver wire. It was requested. I'm a man of the people. I'm putting out the defense ranking video tomorrow along with the wide receiver rankings video, so stay tuned for that one. But this past week, it was possibly my worst week ever calling fantasy football defenses. Detroit in my top 12. Obviously, they got absolutely bludgeoned, beaten, and battered and humiliated by the Ravens. Las Vegas, absolutely embarrassed by the Chicago Bears. They were inside my top 12. Los Angeles Rams, they were in my top 12. Absolutely. They weren't embarrassed by the Pittsburgh Steelers, but they were not good in fantasy football, I'll tell you that. Buffalo, my number 1 defense, awful. Lost to the Patriots. Something's going on with Buffalo. We'll discuss that on a later date. And San Francisco tonight. San Francisco tonight was just, their defense looked gassed at the end. They looked totally gassed and overwhelmed by what Kirk Cousins was throwing at them. It was a bad, bad week of fantasy football defense for me. I was embarrassed, honestly. When all was said and done, and I looked at it tonight, and I was like, oh my gosh. Like, the amount of calls I got wrong on defense this week was embarrassing. So I got to say that defense, like I said, I take it seriously in fantasy football, because I have won and lost championships in fantasy football over the decade I've played in fantasy football based on defense. And I'm glad this was not championship weekend, because there was a bad, bad week for fantasy football defense calls on my channel. So I got to call that one out. As right as I was about Jordan Addison, Jack Smith-Njigba, I was so wrong about the defense. All the calls this week. Not all of them, but a lot of the calls in my top 12. I just rattled off 5 for you that were absolutely awful. So, bad week for defenses. And guys, if you're just joining, I am going through what I got right and what I got wrong in week 7 fantasy football. I'm discussing the lessons I learned from those calls I made. So, every week I do this after the Monday night game. I go live to go through everything I got right and wrong, because I want to be absolutely transparent with my audience. Not many fantasy football YouTubers do this type of video. And honestly, I think it's kind of ridiculous. This is something that you can't move forward unless you learn from your mistakes and you grow. So the reason it's live is because I want you guys to be able to take the opportunity to dunk on me. Go ahead. It's live for a reason. I want you guys to see how raw and transparent this segment is. So if you support this segment and if you support the channel, please go down there, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and we're going to keep on going through what I got right and wrong. So another guy that I got right, and this one, so interesting about D'Onta Foreman. D'Onta Foreman's a guy that he's been around in this league for a long time. For those of you who are new in fantasy football, I don't expect anybody to know that. D'Onta Foreman's not a big name. He's been basically a career backup. And, dating back to his college days when he was at UT, I always thought that D'Onta Foreman was a tremendous talent. I thought that he was, when I watched him at UT, and I was at Texas Tech, and he had a 2,000-yard season, and he absolutely ripped Tech to shreds. I was like, this guy's going to be a legit fantasy stud at the running back position in the NFL. It didn't exactly pan out that way. And I kind of have a unique interest in D'Onta Foreman because my sister's boyfriend actually went to high school with D'Onta Foreman, and he actually played football with D'Onta Foreman. And so I kind of get a little bit of insight from my sister's boyfriend on D'Onta Foreman. I'll keep that private. Sometimes it comes out in my analysis on him, but I'll keep it private for the most part. But he's always said, D'Onta Foreman's a guy that is just so talented, but, not always like a grinder, right? So D'Onta Foreman is always a guy that I've always had a unique interest in. And so I watched him very close. And what you've seen from years and years since D'Onta Foreman's been in this league, essentially what started out is he started out in Houston. He was a third-round pick, and he did nothing, literally nothing for Houston. They cut him. And he basically is fighting for a roster spot ever since then. And I don't know if that's what he needed, but ever since then, he's been relevant when he gets a chance, and he's looked really good. And so obviously now he's in Chicago. And when Khalil Herbert went down, I was like, okay, it's Roschon Johnson time. It's still not going to be D'Onta Foreman time. It's just not going to happen. Well, obviously Roschon's missed the last two games. And in week 6, I told you guys, I said, D'Onta Foreman's not a bad option. And he wasn't bad, but he wasn't great. I think he had 15 carries for 60 yards. So again, not bad, but definitely not anything to jump up and down about, right? So heading into the week, I was very steady on my opinion on D'Onta Foreman. I said, guys, he's not a bad option this week, especially against the Las Vegas Raiders defense. I'll take that over a lot of guys this week. I will take that. And I got some flack for it. I got flack for it. And I saw a lot of people say, this is ridiculous. Why would you make this kind of call? And I said, look at the history of D'Onta Foreman. This dude, wherever he's been, has stepped in at some point and been really good. Carolina stepped in when Christian McCaffrey was gone and Chuba Hubbard was gone. Had several great games in fantasy football. When he was in Tennessee, Derrick Henry down that foot year was really, really good for a long stretch of time in fantasy football. And I said, I'm not going to predict that he gets, a 3-touchdown game, for example, but I know for a fact that D'Onta Foreman's a good option. And he comes out and he scores a hat trick on the Raiders. It's so typical D'Onta Foreman. Like I said, I've got a unique interest in D'Onta Foreman just because of the connection I kind of have there. I don't know the guy personally, but like I said, I have, family that's, been close with D'Onta Foreman in the past. So I've got kind of a unique interest in him, and I've watched him, and I've followed his career, and the guy he's a good player. He's just not a starter-worthy player. But when he gets his opportunity, he takes it. And he took it by the horns on Sunday versus the Raiders, man. And for those of you who I told to play D'Onta Foreman this week, I'm glad I did. And I'm glad that you listened, and I'm glad that you played him because, obviously, the chances that you won your fantasy matchup are pretty high because it probably, he was probably a flex for you or maybe a running back 2 for you. And if you had Bijan Robinson, for example, like he supplemented Bijan's production. So D'Onta Foreman obviously was a really good play, and very happy about that take right there that I had with D'Onta Foreman last week. And I'll tell you what, moving forward, just a side note, if D'Onta Foreman, if Roschon Johnson is going to be out again, I will definitely play Roschon Johnson yet again this week. And Roschon Johnson's matchup this week, in week 8, Roschon Johnson is playing the Chargers. The Chargers defense is not very good. They've got talent, but they're not a very good defense. They're not well coached. So I would play him again if Roschon Johnson sits, or even if he's limited. I am interested in Roschon Johnson again. So stay tuned. The analysis, the research, it will come to light when I do some running back rankings and must-start sits. So just stay tuned for the videos this week. Last thing I got wrong, guys. And again, right and wrong segment right now. I do it every week. At the end of every week, at the end of the Monday night game, I go live to discuss what I got right and what I got wrong in fantasy football for the week. So if you appreciate this segment, you appreciate the honesty, the transparency, please go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Here's the last thing I got wrong. So it's so funny. I'm I got this one wrong again. And honestly, like as much as I just said a couple minutes ago with Jordan Addison, I've gotten a lot of buy low trade targets right over the season. Over the course of the season, you can go back to the videos and see the calls I've made on buy lows. But that does not come without my faults. And I tell you what, like, if I go back again, I would not include Calvin Ridley as a buy low trade target after week 2. I think it was after week 2. It was after week 2 or week 3. That's it. So it was embarrassing. I mean, honestly, like, it's so crazy to me because it's like early. I had Calvin Ridley as a wrong player in this very segment after week 1 fantasy football. And I said, I was wrong on Calvin Ridley. If you've got him, play the guy. He's going to be great in fantasy football this year. What a ride it's been since then. Calvin Ridley has basically had one more good game since then and just a bunch of nothing. And he gave you a nothing burger on Thursday night this week in week 7 versus the New Orleans Saints. It's honestly just a situation with Calvin Ridley where I can't confidently tell you guys to put Calvin Ridley out there right now. He's killing your team. He's killing you. It's not good. So if I could go back in time, I would not include Calvin Ridley as a buy low trade target, because the reality with this guy is it's not only his fantasy production. Like, some weeks you go out there, you get 10 targets, and you only come down with 4 catches for 30 yards and no touchdowns, right? It's like, okay, whatever. He got 10 targets, right? That's not the only problem here with Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley goes out there sometimes and he gets 4 targets. And then the next week he'll get 12. And he'll have 4 receptions for 60 yards on those 12 targets. Then the next week he'll get 8 targets and he'll get 7 catches for 70 yards. There is something wrong with Calvin Ridley in Jacksonville. And my analysis, I don't think, is still correct. Like, my preseason analysis on Calvin Ridley, I still do think was wrong. Because the basis of my analysis on Calvin Ridley before the season was the fact that this guy would not be able to hold up after missing basically the last time he played was 2021. I don't think that the basis of that analysis is correct. I'm not changing that. That's not what I got wrong. But there's something going on here in Jacksonville, and there's a clear disconnect. He does not have good chemistry with Trevor Lawrence. Now, he's definitely the best big play wide receiver that Trevor Lawrence has. I'm not debating that. He's the best wide receiver as far as making big plays that Trevor Lawrence has. But there's a clear disconnect with him and Trevor Lawrence. And honestly, like, I saw it today. Doug Peterson said we need to work on getting Calvin Ridley involved more. So they clearly do not have him front of mind every week in the game plan. And I said this in the offseason as well. This part of my analysis was right. Christian Kirk in that offense, he's got the big deal. Calvin Ridley does not. Christian Kirk's got chemistry with Trevor Lawrence. Calvin Ridley does not. So it's a right and wrong situation here, really, because I was right about the output of Calvin Ridley. I was right about the Christian Kirk part of Calvin Ridley, but I was wrong about him not being able to hold up. Dude looks like he's like his body's holding up fine. But I mean, I'll tell you what, guys. Calvin Ridley, I called him a buy low trade target early in the season. And if I go back in time, that's one I would absolutely love to have back because if my audience, if just one person in the audience that's watching this video right now or not watching this video anymore because I screwed them over, that's enough for me to say, I wish I did not say that because it really, that's a call that's just like, I should have waited. I should have waited a little bit longer to see what Calvin Ridley's involvement would be because let's not forget, this is not only his first year back playing football in years, but it's also his first year in Jacksonville. So, like, the fact that I was ready to call him a clear wide receiver one in fantasy football again was ridiculous. So that's one I would love to have back. And that one, I kick myself over Calvin Ridley on a lot of different angles right now in fantasy football. So that was what I got right and what I got wrong in week 7 fantasy football, guys. I'll go ahead, take 2 questions, and I got to sign off for the night. We will do another question and answer week 8 fantasy football live stream later on in the week. Wednesday night will be that night, guys. Tonight, I got to film the wide receiver rankings video for tomorrow and the defense ranking video for tomorrow. So it's going to be a late night. Please go down there, drop a like, and subscribe to the channel to show your support for the channel. It's greatly appreciated, guys. Okay. So, Chuff Me Donk asks, should I drop Dameon Pierce for Singletary or Tyjae Spears? Good question here. Now, I called Dameon Pierce a buy low trade target after week 6. And you know, it's not that I'm confident that he's going to be some elite player in fantasy football all of a sudden. But in that video, I did say, like, his trajectory is pointing up. And it was on the contrary of a lot of fantasy football YouTubers out there who consistently say, like, no, this guy's trending down. I don't see it that way. I don't. And I'll tell you why. Yeah, I acknowledge that Devin Singletary is getting more work. I acknowledge that. But Dameon Pierce, where he comes through for me, is that when you look at his actual volume over the past several weeks, it's increasing. The reality with Houston is they're trying to get a more balanced offense because early in the season, when they were trying to find some footing, CJ Stroud was throwing the ball a lot. They did not have much of a balanced offense. So the fact that Dameon Pierce's volume is going up is what to look for. So when I look at Singletary, right? Singletary is not any better of a player than Dameon Pierce. Now, I will admit, Dameon Pierce has been a disappointment this year. I had him projected to be a top 15 running back in fantasy football at one time. So I'm disappointed with his output so far. When it comes to him and Singletary, I'm sticking with Pierce. I'm sticking with Pierce because I know that he's the better player. And I think it's just they're getting him going. And this Houston team is getting it going as a whole. So I still prefer Pierce over Singletary personally. Tyjae Spears is interesting because Tyjae Spears is getting more volume as well, but Derrick Henry's volume is dropping. So, and it's clear as day that, like, if you just watch the games and look at the numbers, like, Tyjae Spears has been the third down back in this offense almost 100% of the time. So he has legitimate, consistent volume. Singletary doesn't have legitimate, consistent volume. But Dameon Pierce, to me, is still the guy that I prefer out of Tyjae Spears and Singletary. If I could get Tyjae Spears on my team without dropping Singletary, that's the move I want to make personally. But if I had to drop Dameon Pierce for him, I'll wait. And hopefully Tyjae Spears will be on the waiver wire next week if Dameon Pierce comes out and lays an egg. So we'll have to see on that one personally. They're playing the Panthers this week, the Houston Texans are, so I think it's going to be a good week for Dameon Pierce personally. One more question, guys, and then I'm going to go ahead and sign off for the night. Let's see what we got right here. Omar's burner, Chris Olave or Davante Adams? Okay, yeah, this is a great question. I don't know if you guys saw this. Actually, this literally came out minutes ago. Before I started the live stream, Chris Olave was arrested tonight. It wasn't anything huge. He basically was going 35 over the speed limit, and he was cooperative with police. Like, whatever. I mean, it's not like it's really that big of a deal. As far as the details that were shared with us and that we know, it doesn't sound like a big deal. To me, but I like the arrest aside, Chris Olave is a concern for me right now. I really am concerned with Chris Olave. And to be clear, like Chris Olave is a guy that I loved coming into the season. I loved Chris Olave. And really, most fantasy football YouTubers did. Like, this was not a unique take by me. And that's not to absolve myself of, like any kind of blame in that. It's just to say that I think most of you expected Chris Olave to be good. The reality is something's not right in New Orleans. Because when you look at the target share, there's no question that Chris Olave is underperforming right now. He's dominating in target share in New Orleans right now. And Michael Thomas and Rashid Shaheed, they've had their moments in fantasy, but it's been Chris Olave that's consistently leading the team in targets. And in that Thursday night game in week 7, Olave had 15 targets and he had like 7 catches for like 60 yards. It's just not good enough. It's not good enough. And there's a disconnect there with him and Derek Carr. There is. And that scares me. That worries me. Because when I look at Davante Adams, right? Davante Adams is in a very similar situation. There's a clear disconnect with him and his quarterbacks every single week, regardless of if it's Jimmy Garoppolo, regardless of if it's Brian Hoyer or Aiden O'Connell. There's a disconnect there in Las Vegas as well. The reason I choose Davante Adams over Chris Olave still is because we've seen it from Davante Adams year after year after year after year. Davante Adams is just a top-tier player in this league. It's not been his best year. It's been one of his worst years in recent memory. But I know for a fact that Davante Adams still will give you top-level fantasy production in certain weeks this season. His days of 20 to 25 to 30-point fantasy games this season are not over. He will do it again. It's just a matter of when. It really is, because he got 12 targets again on Sunday versus the Bears. It just has been there for him. Jacoby Myers has been finding the end zone. And he's been great. Like, at this point, Jacoby Myers is basically a must-start player. So, Davante Adams, I still do prefer him over Olave, though, because there's a disconnect there in both teams, both with Olave and Derek Carr, and both with Davante and his circus of quarterbacks that he deals with on a weekly basis. But I know for a fact that I'm going Davante because we've seen it consistently over the years with Davante Adams, and he hasn't lost a step. I've watched Davante Adams very closely this season. The dude is still as good as ever. He's just got to disconnect at the quarterback position. They both do, though. So in that case, I'm going with the guy that we know has already done it this season. Like, he's already had great games. And also, we've seen it over a much longer period of time than we have with Chris Olave. So I prefer Davante Adams. I'm going to go ahead and sign out tonight, guys. It was what I got right and what I got wrong. The question and answer live stream is going to be coming on Wednesday. We're going to do a couple this week. So if I didn't get to your question, we're going to try it again on Wednesday, going through the questions and answers on Wednesday for Week 8 fantasy football. So if you appreciate the segment, if you appreciate what I do, please go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. And I will see you guys in tomorrow's wide receiver ranking videos and in my top 12 defense ranking videos. See y'all tomorrow.